23 years. We started in 1999. And just to tell you a little bit about us, we're really proud. First of all, we're really proud to sponsor the .NET user group this month. We've spoken at a couple. We definitely attend them. So yeah, really excited to be a part of this one as well. Yeah, and just to get a few shameless plugs in for us real quick, kind of let everyone know what we do. So Orion, we use the top tech to be a leading fintech software company to help financial advisors grow their business and help investors thrive and reach their goals. We have a variety of platforms and applications, white labeled investor portals, reporting, trading, financial planning tools, very large import and ETL processes, and risk analysis, and that's just kind of a few of them. We're always looking for good people to join one of our 20 squads we have. We really strive to make sure each squad runs like a startup. It's really how we're able to move fast and stay ahead of our competition. We try allowing as much autonomy as possible for each squad, let them make their own decisions. Each squad has all the disciplines it needs to control their own destiny. It's definitely something that we take pride in, is making sure that each squad, that what kills us is when we have dependencies that cross squads and trying to align sprint plans and that sort of thing. So really try to make sure each squad is their own. So yeah, here's a list of disciplines we have within the squad, all of which we have openings. So if you do happen to know anybody that wants to dip their toe and look to see if there's something better out there, would love to talk to them and let them know what we have to offer. Our tech stack, we have everything. We've acquired businesses over the years. We've tried things that have been successful and stuck. So we have everything, literally, I think. But our primary tools are .NET, SQL Server, MySQL, Angular, React, Vue, Kafka, AWS services, and we're starting to see some Blazor. And with that, that's my spiel. I want to introduce one of our very own, a .NET evangelist. He's an accomplished speaker at Nebraska Code, HDC, Lincoln.Code, as well as the top .NET user group, the Omaha user group. His hobbies include, he's the founder of the BattleTech Omaha League. You can find it on Facebook, has over 50 users or in the community. He does several community outreach programs, teaching technology to young adults and roundtables for the youth. And with that, please welcome Tim Ingledew.
All right, thanks, Ben. So tonight, we're going to go ahead. I've got a quick slideshow presentation for everyone that represents about 2 to 3% of the entire presentation I've got. We've got about 97%, which is going to be deep into the code. It's all going to be technical based. The focus for the end of the evening is, if you already know Blazor WebAssembly, you should know it better. If there's some features of the technology that maybe you're a little unsure of, maybe you haven't seen before, we're going to be exposing them tonight. If you've never seen Blazor or WebAssembly code before, you're going to be fully indoctrinated. As a matter of fact, at the end of today's session, you would be fully qualified to go out and write your own application. As a bonus, to anyone who stays to the end of the meeting, I will have all source code available on GitHub. It will be publicly available for at least the next couple days. You can go ahead, clone it, download it to your local machines, find out what you like about it, what you love. Maybe you'll find the 2 bugs I left in place hidden for you to challenge yourselves with. But it's really going to be a lot of information there. I will go ahead and go into the code once I want to get to the code. So at this stage, if there's no initial questions, I'm going to go ahead and start with the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, let me go ahead and get this fired up.
The bugs, are they really ones that you left for us to find?
They are
Or
actually, they are
you're
absolutely.
just protecting yourself.
No. You are only see the, I'm not going to tell you where the bugs are because you're not going to see them. But I'm aware there is one very, very cool design feature. Let me go ahead and see if I can share this here. 1 second. All right. So Blazor and Blazor UI components. Why your next project should be Blazor WebAssembly. Using tooling to engineer the best of breed applications in the modern era. And this is one I think I really like about Blazor and WebAssembly, the concept of the modern era. The next slide, I kind of go a little bit of my history here, where I've got, 6+ years of Angular JS. I put 6+ and not 8+, because the last 2 years I really haven't done a lot of Angular JS or Angular, because I've been exposed to Blazor and WebAssembly, and I have found that his lighted a passion within me personally. It's kind of hard to describe. But we'll kind of get into that a little bit. So currently, I am a dev leader at Orion Advisor Tech. I work in the enterprise infrastructure team. Fully experienced with Angular, like I mentioned a moment ago. So from this perspective, when I'm talking about, hey, what is Node.js or how does Node.js work compared to how does Blazor or WebAssembly work? How does C# tie in versus JavaScript? I'm fully experienced in that entire ecosystem. Unfortunately, I do not have React experience, so I can't give you a React perspective or a Vue.js perspective. But from an Angular or Node.js perspective, I can absolutely give you those insights. And Blazor WebAssembly came out about 4 years ago, and I've been heavily involved for the last 3 years. I have probably written 20+ applications, either for experimental, for fun, doing what have you. Ben mentioned the Facebook BattleTech group. I'm actually currently designing a full-fledged software suite for that. Hopefully it'll be released the next 3 months, 4 months. We'll have to see how that turns out. This is a slide which I got from Tech Empower, which really talks about .NET 6. Historically, people could say, well, I heard rumors that Blazor wasn't very fast. Now, you have to remember, Blazor came out in .NET 3, and the framework itself was a little bit slower, worked a little bit differently than how it does, .NET 5, .NET 6. .NET 6, there have been vast speed improvements over all of Core 6, but also directly as it relates to Blazor itself. And here you see, for example, we have 7.01 million requests per second. Node.js, that's about 0.66 with the exact same data load. That's 10 times faster than Node.js. So people ask, Tim, why don't you still do Angular a lot? Now, personally, it's preference. Some people could be Angular developers. They love Angular. Nothing wrong with that. But as I look at these numbers, I question where Microsoft is going, where the .NET Core, ecosystem is going. And I feel that being able to develop in one stack that you're familiar with, C# in this example, and utilizing the full features of that as part of your web development space, there's a lot of synergy there. And you'll have to experience that, or you can take my word for it. Over here, just for their slide, you notice there's also improvements in Entity Framework. Previously, I have worked with applications I built using stored procedures. I've used Dapper. I've used Entity Framework. About 6 months ago, I gave a presentation here dealing with Entity Framework Plus or Entity Framework Extensions, I believe it's called. And in that time, 5-6 months ago, I showed an example how you could load 40,000 rows of data in a grid UI using Blazor, and you could do it depending upon the iteration cycle anywhere between like 2 to 7 seconds. And that was on .NET 5. Now, granted, you would never ever want to load a UI page for the most part natively as one feed, 40,000 rows of data. But I demonstrated it to this group, and it was that quick. So it kind of gives you a little idea of if they could do that in .NET 5, what could it do in .NET 6 if you're pushing the envelope? The next over here, common terms. Blazor WebAssembly or WASM Often they're both called Blazor. So when someone says, hey, we're talking Blazor, they could actually be referring to WebAssembly. They could actually be referring to Blazor. What are the differences? Blazor or Blazor server is a common parlance. That says I'm building a project, a web-based project that is a UI that's going to talk directly to the server. It lives with the server. It has access to all of the server features, dependency injection, any framework, basically the whole .NET ecosystem right there. WebAssembly or Wasm, Blazor client. So whenever someone says, hey, I'm working with Blazor client, they're really talking about they're doing WebAssembly work. And what WebAssembly work is effectively, it is code that you develop in C# that is downloaded to the client machine, and the client machine itself will do the page renderings. It'll do everything else it needs. It will detect if there has been an update. It will go out to the server. It will get that update if it needs to, but it is extremely fast. Now, the caveat, because it lives on the client machine, means if you want data, if you want interactivity with the server, then you do have to go through an API call to go back out to the server to have whatever that is you want, to happen. So our good and well-trusted friends at Wikipedia, to kind of borrow, what is it? Use C# for web development. Blazor, it's hosted in ASP.NET Core server in ASP.Razor format. So remote clients act as thin clients, meaning the bulk of the processing load is on the server. The client's web browser downloads a small page and updates the UI over a SignalR connection. WebAssembly, it's effectively a single page application that is downloaded to the client's web browser before running, and the process is done entirely on the client software. Very, very, very fast response time. As the name suggests, it's a thin client-side framework is written in WebAssembly. That's a little bit of a misnomer parts on Wikipedia. Actually, you write it in C#, but it's compiled and served to the web browser as WebAssembly. So I just want to make that note here, a little bit different from Wikipedia states. So features of both Blazor server, it is server-side code, direct integration with the server-side functionality. There's Razor pages. You may use JavaScript. You don't have to, but if you really have something cool in JavaScript you want to use, you can do that. There's SignalR to maintain that connection. Very responsive. Earlier, I gave that illustration, 40,000 rows in 2 to 8 seconds. That's very responsive. Tonight, you're going to see some speeds that are going to be mind-blowing. Blazor clients. It's client-side code, requires API to fetch data, Razor pages. You also may use JavaScript if you would like to use the JavaScript library. Extremely responsive. And really what this means from the JavaScript library perspective, my personal philosophy is you can keep everything in C#. You don't need JavaScript, but let's say your organization has a bunch of components written. Let's say you have Angular components or something else, and you're like, hey, we've got years invested in this technology. We want to go to Blazor, but we're not going to give up all these components. Well, because it can read and understand and execute JavaScript from C#, by the way, you can still have access to those components. Ideal situation is rewrite them as C# components, but if you want to keep, that information, still have it there, it is still possible. Continuing. So right here, hopefully everyone can see the screen. Here's a Blazor server web page, the networking tab, and the weather server. This is a default out of the box page. And look at the networking tab, fetch data, which is the second entry here. You'll notice it took 11 milliseconds to load that web page. Now, 11 milliseconds is pretty fast. Now, going over here, you notice there's several pending connections. That's basically representing that SignalR that's still there, and that's why you see those. But overall, you see we have 11 seconds. Most of it's below 10. We have a 20. We have a 13. Extremely quick. Over this next page, we now have a custom Blazor application. And this custom Blazor application is a simply CRUD event we have. And what we have here is a scenario, it's a library, and we're getting all books from the library or from SQL Server using Entity Framework. And I'm also using AutoMapper, by the way. So looking at this, and I'm going to magnify because this is very hard to see. You'll see this page loaded in 49 milliseconds. Going through, 5, 6, 7 different renditions, that's been as low as 20 milliseconds. It's been like up to 68 milliseconds. So the fact that we are, averaging maybe 40 to 50 milliseconds for loading a page, obviously there's not a lot of data in this page, but just the whole infrastructure of how to get the page, all the default information on the page, plus you're getting data from SQL Server, and you're going through auto mapping, and you're using Entity Framework, that is still pretty fast. I would argue 49 milliseconds is a dream in most UI development worlds. Anyway, that's kind of the speed for this. I'm going to go ahead and magnify back down to normal. Here are some quick resources. Here we have the Microsoft resource. If you guys want to make a screenshot, please do. Mudblazor.com. We are going to get into Mudblazor towards the later part of the session. I would plead with you to stay to the end so you'll see the cool stuff from Mudblazor, because the evening keeps getting cooler and cooler and cooler the later on the session goes. I would like to give special thanks to some online people who I have followed very passionately. Tim Corey, if you want to know about Blazor, WebAssembly, store procedures, Dapper, he's your person. Brugan Patel, he's overall very, very keen. He uses the in-tier development architecture pattern for both Blazor and WebAssembly. Excellent resource. Frank Liu uses what he calls the clean architecture, or the plug-and-play architecture, for both Blazor and WebAssembly. Check them all out. You will be amazed. Via YouTube, Udemy, and their personal sites. And I'm going to re-show this slide at the end of the evening. This is the personal GitHub. Like I said, this GitHub will be available so you can look at all the code in your personal machine, download it, do what you need to do. I will re-show this at the end of the night, so if you don't get it now, you can get it then. I'm excited to get ready. Hopefully everyone else is excited as well. With this, if there are no questions, and I'll give it a pause here while I switch screens, I'm going to go ahead and get into the code directly. Okay. I take it there are no questions. At least I didn't hear any questions.
Hey, Tim, just a quick note.
Yes.
The links that you've been showing, I've been dumping those in the chat. So if you want to get those, if anybody wants to get those over there, they should be in there. I'll try to do that throughout the presentation if I can.
Nice. Those should be probably the only external links that we're going to have until the very end. Then we'll get into a little bit more. Thank you. So really quick, I'm going to talk about the architecture of the program really fast. For tonight's purposes, this is the architecture I chose because I think it is the most universally understood architecture. We could have gone into a mediator pattern. We could have gone into different types of patterns. This here is using a traditional in-tier pattern because, like I said, I think it has an easy adoption for understanding. And the purpose of tonight is to try to spread the knowledge, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. I am going to be showing 3 different Blazor server projects. You'll notice the naming conventions I call Blazor Book Server, Blazor Server, and Mud Server. So these are basically our UI projects we have. Everything I show you tonight looks exactly the same 99.9% of the time as a WebAssembly project. So if we were to go ahead and take a look, say, hey, what does a WebAssembly project look like? What does the code look like? If you're seeing a Blazor server project, you are also effectively seeing a WebAssembly project. There are literally very minor differences, and the code base, they're exactly the same. So kind of an FYI. So over here, really quick, just kind of a high level, our business layer, typical interfaces, we have a manager, we have a mapper. You'll notice I use a new C# feature, global usings. So we are basically taking all of our using statements and putting them down here. Data access, very straightforward. This was a code first SQL Server, local SQL Server implementation. So that's what I've designed this for. And once again, we do have some global usings. Global users, if you have not used them before, they are effectively a C# class. You put it at the project level, and all items in that project will go ahead and use those. So you do not have to have all those, plethora of using statements above your namespace. And then for our purposes, I just have one comment for common and view models. Very short, very quick. And that's effectively what we have here. To make sure there's no special magic happening, here is our data view model we're working. Here is our entity framework tie-in that we're using. Nothing too outlandish here. And once again, that source code will be available to you. The mapper, if you've not used AutoMapper before, using the mapper profile, Basically, what this does allows you to map from the view model, aka the book DTO, to the database model book. Reverse map means it'll go the other way as well, from book to book DTO. So basically, you have two-way mapping, if you will, and you'll see that in the manager. The manager itself, we have an interface, we have our data context, we have our mapper, we have our basic constructor, and then we have our basic setup. We have our object, which is the book DTO being mapped over to book. We're adding that to our context. We're saving those changes and we're returning the response back to the caller. The same thing has happened in each of these scenarios. So that's not the focus of tonight. By all means, freely check these out on your own when you look at the source code. I'm not going to be spending any time on this tonight, other than to let you know that, hey, we actually are using Entity Framework and we actually are going through that ecosystem. Really quick, we're going to go ahead and click on Blazor Server. Going through here, you'll happen to notice that this here is the default project, and everything .NET 6 is going through the program.cs file. You'll notice I've made no changes in this particular one because this is the default when I do not have anything coming from our business and database layers. But this here is what I'm going to talk about, the life cycle of Blazor and how things actually work and how you can test things. So I will be going into the other projects in detail. I will go through dependency injection when we hit to those particular projects. And you'll see that when we hit the book server as well as the MUD server. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with Blazor Server. So for those people joining us tonight and they want to know about lifecycle, perhaps you want to know about how does routing work, how do components work. Did you know that you can have a parent page talk to a child page, or a grandparent talk to its parent, talk to that parent's child and the grandchild? Blazor allows you to communicate via web pages directly from web page A, B, C, D, E to whatever length you want to extend. I'm not sure if there actually is a limit. Tonight we're going to actually showing you a parent talking to a grandchild and a parent talking to a child. Not only that, well, we're going to show you a parent calling methods in the child and a child calling methods in the parent, and then passing information back and forth from the grandchild to the parent. In normal development, I'm thinking that's going to be quite painful to visualize, perhaps even to set up. With Blazor, you're going to see it is so smooth and so nice and so easy to implement. You're going to, hopefully you'll be as impressed as I was. To start off, let's talk about routing. So over here, we have a simple page. I notice the route is routing. I'm going to go ahead and move this over here, and let's actually look a little bit more in depth. So we are now looking at Blazor Server. I'm going to come down here to the shared. We have what's called the nav menu. And let's see if I can open this up a little bit more and make it a little bit more presentable. Okay, so this is default out of the bag as far as the home, as far as the counter. Here is a package counter that happens. It's a component. Here's a default weather service. This is the one that had that 20-some milliseconds load time, 5-6 rows of data, nothing special. I left them here just so you can see what you get out of the box. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. We'll do that on the other exercises. So let's go back to routes. So over here, we have the nav menu. First thing you notice, we have the home, we have the counter, home, counter, we have fetch data, we have fetch data. Let's look at routing. So first thing you'll notice is I have a route here, /routing, and then of course we have the text that everyone sees on the screen. If I were to go ahead and I were to look for this individual /routing, and let's look at our buckets here. I have a folder I called routing, and I have a routing.razor. You will notice that inside of Blazor, the page itself, you define your route on that page. So as an example, routing.razor page, I've just decided that routing is a valid route, routing with a parameter is a valid route, routing with 2 parameters, one of which must be int, of course, by default, the other one is string. These are all valid routes. And you saw when I clicked on the routing over here on the left, it did absolutely route to that location. But imagine this, if you will. Imagine if I were to come over here and say, you know what, I want a new route. I'm going to call try new route. And then I'm going to go back to my page, which is now my nav menu page. And I'm going to come over to here, and we're just going to do a little live coding, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to try that new route. I'm going to come into here. I'm going to just do verbatim. I'm going to call this routing 2. And I'm going to hit the hot reload. And so this particular one, because I had some changes that the entire ecosystem needs to process, we'll go ahead and restart the application for us. Normally within Blazor .NET Core 6, if you're making UI only changes, you can go ahead and make those changes without restarting your application. So you see routing 2 has appeared, and voila, we now have access to it. Try a new route. So that's how quickly it is to do it. There is no separate routing.js module that you're working with for this. You do it at the page level, and that's how you set it up. To kind of expand that a little quick, I personally defined the structure of these for this conversation. If I wanted to, I could have made that route demo / routing / and then added in the extra context that I wanted here. But this routing that you see in lines 1 through 4 does not reflect the actual hierarchical position of these files within your Solution Explorer. It only reflects what you call them, and that's how it identifies it. The at compile time, if you have an invalid route or a route already exists, that's what I really mean to say. If it already exists, you will be notified that the route already exists, and therefore you could change it to a route that'll work for you. So I'm going to go back to the nav menu. Let's go ahead and clean this up so we're not looking at route 2 all day. Okay, so I did this here really quick. I'm going to hot reload. Notice the application did not restart. It's the same application without restarting it, and the routing 2 has disappeared from my menu on the left over here. Really cool, really cool. Let's talk about these really fast. And I'm going to go ahead and move the web page over a little bit because really we're just looking at the code now. Obviously, this route doesn't exist as far as the nav menu, but it doesn't hurt if it's still here. Maybe we'll add it back or take it out later. Line 6 we have is called the Navigation Manager. This allows you to navigate from web page to web page. Down here, you'll see on line 38, we are using it. In this scenario, we're actually routing and navigating to a brand new web page, aka the same web page, but with particular routing in mind. So over here, let's look at things. First, I'm going to describe what is a Blazor page, or what is a WebAssembly page. This is Tim's terminology, which I'm about to tell you from my experience. Is how I like referring to them. Effectively, the very start of your page is where your routing mechanics goes. You put the @ symbol, the page, space, double quote, whatever your route is, that works. Line 6, this is effectively, originally I used to thought, this is your dependency injection kicking in, if you will. In here, we're going to be accessing Navigation Manager. Some people may think of it as a constructor. It's really not a constructor, but it does satisfy the dependency injection and setting this up for use. Some people question, well, should it just be called a constructor here, or maybe want to have some constructor logic in the code? So I'm going to talk about the code, what this means in a little minute. But effectively, this here is all your page header level of information. If you had using statements and you wanted them to come up here, they would actually come up here like on line 5, line 6, line 7, and you'd put your using statements here. Blazor, you will notice if we come back down to here, imports, they do not use the new C# global usings class. They have their own, which is simply called _imports.razor. And here is where your using statements go. If you have a choice now, you can use them here in imports razor, or you can go ahead and you can put them in your individual pages. When would I use an individual page using statement versus the imports using statement? I would do that from a standpoint of maybe there's a conflict. Maybe there are 2 different using statements that share similar names. Then I would keep the local reference on my page so it would have precedence. Let's continue. Everything in here from line 8 to line 17, this is typical UI stuff. You'll notice the Blazor syntax when you see the @ symbol. So this here says I have a C# parameter. I have a C# parameter. So first of all, really cool. You now have C# in your code, in your web page. Very cool. You have an on-click event. This is a Blazor syntax on-click event. Navigate to query parm. We're now calling a C# function or method from an HTML page. Also very cool. We have on-click here, load parameters, also calling a C# method. Down here, this is kind of interesting. And we're going to talk more into this in a little bit, but we have what's called parameters. Parameters are values which can be passed from one web page to another web page, or in this particular scenario, they're being accepted from the route, and we're going to be reading these parameters as this web page loads. Then over here, load parameters. We're simply coming down here, we're grabbing an absolute URI. We're going to be parsing this information out to a parm. We're going to load up those parms to 1 and 2. And then effectively, when we do get down to navigate, we're going to go ahead and refresh or load the web page with the routes. So really quick, I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to click on navigate to query parameter. So you'll notice, even though it didn't look like anything happened, it happened so fast, you didn't see it. But it actually did load a brand new page with this appropriate routing. Parameter 1 and parameter 2 routing demo. So looking back at our code, I'm going to move this over. You can see where those routes came from. And then load parameters. We're now actually loading those parameters, routing 1 and routing demo. And you can see how query string parameters, how these are being fed and populated to the web page from C# variables. Another really cool thing about Blazor, which I really love over some other technologies, if you come into here and you're like, I wonder what's happening, instant debug. Instant debug to immediately challenge or investigate whatever it is you're doing. And I'm like, how cool is that? I think that's pretty cool. That's effectively routing. Everything you'd want to know about routing. Also talked about the web page in general. I'm going to talk about the structure before we move on to the next topic, though. All this up here is effectively UI or markup with C#. The code aspect is where all your C# code. I usually refer, and this is my personal vernacular, I refer to lines 21 through 26 as the page state, if you will. And what I mean by that is anything that you declare as a variable inside, basically your code block at this level, your web page knows about it, but so does your C#. You can think of it as global page variables that everybody knows about. And in this scenario, you saw how we use those to talk in the C# code, but we also use those to talk to the web code. All right. I'm going to go ahead and look at the next topic here. And we're going to go ahead and look at, let's see. I'm going to look at lifecycle. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on lifecycle next, but I do want to talk about this. One of the things that was always challenging, being a web developer, is trying to figure out when do the lifecycle hooks take effect? How do you monitor them taking effect? And you kind of walk through that whole process. So what we've got here is effectively the lifecycle aspect of Blazor with components, so you can kind of see exactly how they process. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Solution Explorer. I'm going to go to the lifecycle page. And let's take a look at this. And one moment. So first, let's talk about what you see in the Solution Explorer. You have lifecycle.razor, and then you also have underscore lifecycle .razor. What the underscore represents, and there is an emerging standard that is kind of being brought about. And what that says is, if you have a component with an underscore, traditionally that is a routeless component. So what I mean by that, if I click on this, you'll notice there is no @page space double quote / some route name on line 1. So this is a purely a standalone component. And therefore, because it is a routeless or a standalone component, I have named it with an underscore as part of that child component. So let me look at this really quick, and the code will be fully available for you to diagnose this, at your leisure. But we have our route, we have simple header, and then I have some account we're doing. I'm incrementing some counts. We have a little bit of a countdown, which we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we have, which is the main bread and butter of this, we have a child component living in the parent. And what is the life cycle of a component compared to the life cycle of a parent? And how does that operate? Down here, we are effectively building a list of various things. On the right-hand side of the web page, you see I have a bunch of items being displayed with this horizontal rule as a separator. Now going through here, simply this says increment count. It's a standard C# method. These are the key methods I want you to pay attention to. We have oninitialized async, onParameter set async, onAfter render async. Here's another one down here, should something render? And I have comments in here so you can kind of digest those, and it actually talks about what happens here. But using these default Blazor WebAssembly C# methods, you can determine and you can control and you can exercise, your better judgment and wisdom in your development to know exactly how something is going to render, when it will render, and how maybe you need to force something to render if it's not rendering for you already. Very nice. So on here is an example. I'll kind of blow up this web page. Actually, I'll navigate out. I'll navigate back in. Let's pop up to here. So over here, for example, I'm going to do click me. We have a little bit of a timer. You see the child component. It has been activated. Oninitialize was called. OnParameter set was called. I'm going to go into the child component to give you a visual on this. And then, of course, this stuff over here is from the parent component. When did all of these various aspects been called? So that's really interesting. I also have a little bit of a countdown, which is going through multiple iterations of the page, being loaded and reloaded, just so you can kind of see the cycle of things that are rendering. Let me go ahead and look at in-depth the C# now as we look at the child. So first of all, in the parent, you'll notice I simply had this div statement with a lifecycle method. Inside the lifecycle method, the child, I simply have an oninitialized onParameter set, and then I say, hey, the child component, it was called. The child component onParameter set was called, and the onParameter set, in case there's a keyword parameter here. So whenever this parameter has the value, whenever it has been set, when it has basically been recognized, then line 20 will automatically be called by default. Whenever the page here is initialized or whenever it starts to load, this here will be called. And then you can see through the life cycle over here, you can see those activities. Because the parent has a dependency upon the child and the child activated first, that is why you saw the child appear on the web page first, in case you're curious. We said the code will be available for this. Once you actually walk through the code and debug several times, it becomes fairly self-obvious how everything is working. So I strongly encourage you to do that. If there are any questions here, I can definitely entertain those. The next part, however, is going to take a little bit longer, and I'm going to slow way down for the next segments, which is bind properties and then fragments. Any questions on lifecycle before we continue? Okay. The key thing to take away is there are default C# Blazor WebAssembly methods which will allow you to control or allow you to monitor and use and work with the lifecycle of page rendering or activities that happen. And these are defaults that are part of the core framework. Okay, let's come over here and let's go into bind properties. So when I first learned Angular, way back, Angular.com or Angular.io, I was really marveled and amazed by the one-way, the two-way binding, and that's kind of a kid in a candy store. I was like, oh, this is so cool. So this here represents kind of that same thing, the same look and feel. So first of all, I'm going to go through the UI so you kind of see how that works. And then we're going to go ahead and go into the code and so you can kind of see what that two-way binding looks like. So over here, first of all, okay, so over here you see we have a Boolean value. You see in the right-hand side, the Boolean value is changing. Over here, you see no changing happening. That's effectively because it's going from the model to the page, but once it gets to the page, it doesn't do anything else. Over here, and this is something I kind of geeked out about a little bit. This is the default behavior. So when I entered the values in, for the two-way binding. And then when I field exited, Blazor default behavior will go ahead and then have that two-way binding take place. However, you can override that by doing an on input. So if you come over here, you now have two-way binding, which is effectively instantaneous for you. So there are some options, in those regards. Here are just another examples of some more binding that we have. And we'll go ahead and go into the code. And of course, we have things going back and forth. So now I'm going to move this over to here. And let's take a look at bind properties. So as all Blazor pages, let me move this over just a little bit. Hopefully it'll fit. 1 second. Okay, this is a little bit better. Okay, so once again, we have routing at the top. We have our HTML sections all the way going down. Then we have, of course, our code section. We have our declaratives, aka what I referred to earlier as, the state or what is known in the UI, what is known in the C#. Then, of course, we have our individual method, which is on initialize, which is loading up default data, which is what you see on the page here. So let's go through this really quick. So over here, we have a couple interesting things. Bind value is a Blazor syntax, which is now going to take whatever book.active is, and it's going to use that as the value it's being bound to. Over here, we have a ternary function, which is kind of cool. So now you have in your UI page C# if statements effectively, or ternary functions being activated on the fly in your code. One simple line of code, one simple line of markup, very nice. Through here, same repetitive type of features that you see. Down here, we have same thing. You notice I'm using the C# syntax here, or I'm sorry, the Blazor syntax, which represents this will be C#. So here I have two properties which are being effectively concatenated together with the space, all within my HTML using the C# syntax. Book.title, book is active, book price. Another cool thing is you have C# IntelliSense while you're doing your web development. That would speed up, whatever you're doing with IntelliSense. Another example of a ternary function. Over here is a traditional HTML table. We're doing a C# for each loop. Once again, the @ symbol represents C#. It gives you access to C# commands. So you have var books in books. And then over here, we're going through setting up our TD table cells with our information that we're getting from our collection here. And then down here at the bottom, we have something very similar. If we look at how we defined our properties, books, which is what we've been cycling through, is simply coming from our view model. Here we have some default data that's being populated and some more information that's being populated. So as we're looking at our binding, really all we're doing is setting up our bind value tags. We do have an event on input. Remember earlier down here I was showing it will recognize it as you do it. That's effectively what the on input override does versus the default behavior, which you see up here at book.price. And that's effectively data binding. The key things are you have an @bind tag, and then you do what you're going to be doing with that from your data model, whatever your data model is. Same thing over here, you're using C#, cycling through a table, you're doing that dynamically on the fly with full C# IntelliSense. And nothing really special down here. So let's go into children, fragments, parent. Oh, here's the one. Children fragments. I'm going to go through this really slow, and I'm going to kind of slow the whole presentation down here. When we get to the children fragments, parent, child, grandchild, and cascading, these are some revolutionary concepts, and that I think are going to add a lot of value to your development. And you're going to want to use these. Maybe you may not have a use case immediately, but as you're going through developing, these are going to be tools you're going to want in your tool belt. So to start off with, we have, of course, the div itself. Has some click events on the div. We're going to do an add favorites. We're going to do an add favorite over here. Oh, sorry if I clicked on it correctly. Our favorites total has been updated. We're going to show author, and we're going to come through here. So nothing too special from UI perspective. We do have some information, render fragments and render fragments. And this is what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to move this off screen. I'm going to expand this. So this is new. We have a routeless component that we've defined called single book. Our single book is allowing us to send events, properties, and fragments from the parent to the child. Maybe the child will do something with those things. So we see here, we see on favorite updated, we have last selected book change. And then of course, here is our fragments. This is brand new as far as what the fragments are. We'll kind of go into those in a second. Down here, looking at here, we simply have books as being defined, basic setups. We have some basic data we're setting up for default. We have some incrementers, and then we have selected book, book title, last selected book update. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to open up the child, and I will put these side by side. Oh, 1 second. All right, 2 seconds. There we go. Let me go ahead and vertical group. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. So on the left-hand side, we have child and fragments. On the right-hand side, we have our route list component, which is the single book.razor. So first thing that I want to note is the single book obviously is executing this component here. It's being passed in. It says, I'm passing in book. Book is a parameter that we're passing in. Book is part of book DTO in the child. In the parent, book is a single row coming from the books collection. So we have a for each loop, and we're saying, boom, let's go through here and see what we have. If there were more books or we were doing other things, obviously this would be expanded out. So now we have this component with book. We have book here. And then we also have on favorite updated, on last selected, favorite update count, selected book update. So let's look at these. I have an event callback. Whoa, 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 whoa. Are you telling me C# can have event callbacks just like JavaScript? Yes, that's exactly what we're saying. We're now saying through the parameter keywords, you can now do event callbacks in C#, passing whatever information it is you want to send back. In this scenario, we're sending back a bool, we're sending back a string. Let's look a little bit more. See, this says favorite count updates. We have favorite updated async. We have last selected book async. We have selected book update. Let's see, let's go through here. Up here, we have arguments, last selected book. We have on change favorite updated async. And so let's go ahead and walk this through debug really fast. Let's see what's happening as we're going through these pages. Okay, so with this, on the web page over here, I'm going to navigate away just so we start fresh. And we're going to go children and fragments. So right now it has done a default page load. If you'll note, I do not have, well, I've got the initial OIs here, which of course I did not set a breakpoint on. That's why we didn't get to hit. Let's go back and I'm going to do add to favorite. Suddenly, I have clicked on add to favorite on our web page. We immediately went to the child and hit the last selected book. So over here, we notice in the child component, there is an argument that says, hey, last selected book, let's go ahead and pass in, our values, and let's come back down here and let's do something with those. And over here, we're being passed in the last green valley. And now we're saying, hey, on selected book change, invoke async, boom. And Kind of gives you a little bit of what's happening here. I'm going to hit F11. Now on select book update, we're now going back to the parent. We're taking that value back. We're exiting. So very clearly you saw that this was executed from the child, went to the parent, returned back to the child. Normal page lifecycle kicked off, reloaded the values, the last green value on our web page. And very clearly in this scenario, we had communication, method callings from parents to children, data passing back and forth. Our handshaking has occurred. One example. Now I'm going to go ahead and click add to favorite over here. Once again, we get called. I'm on F11. We're going through back to the parent, back to the child to finish the component, the processing for that method on the child. Oh, keep going through here. We got a little bit more activities happening. And we're reloading again, and we see our information's been updated. So in the methods in the classes we're looking at right now, it's really showing about how you can have a child component, how you can tag events from parent to child, how methods can be called, parent-child, child-parents, and how you can really pass information back and forth. And if we look up to here, you'll also notice that we have our fragments. Let's look at these really fast. So we have our fragment one, first fragment and second fragment. Over here, we have our first fragment. We have our second fragment. And over here, you'll notice that we actually pass the value from the parent over to the child. And that's effectively what we've done here. And up here, you see render fragment from parent, first fragment, second fragment. And then if we go back to the web page, we have that information, render fragment from parent, first and second. Oh, sorry, I clicked on it again. Let me turn debug off. Okay, let's go back to the web page. One moment. Okay, so clearly you saw that this component, which is basically the child, got the fragment information, the pound1, pound2, pound1, pound2 from the parents. It did that via the render fragment. So kind of let's look at this really quick, and then we'll move on. So once again, we have our C# for each loop. We're going through, we have our components. We're sending out book level information. We have methods and activities we're going to be doing, and then we're also sending fragment information. And the fragments, if you notice over here how I've defined them, they actually are using the special keyword render fragments, and that's effectively what that is. So in this scenario, we're showing event callbacks, and we're showing render fragments. We're showing the components from parent to child and back again, calling methods back and forth. And this is kind of the high level, if you will. We are going to get a lot more in depth with some really cool things. This is broken down just so for future reference, as you kind of look through the code, you can see how this works when you're developing your own web pages and your own sites for functionality. You'll have this there in your tool belt. So next, we're going to get to parent-child and grandchild and cascading. I'm going to start off by saying I am such a huge fan of the cascading parameters or the cascading feature element tag that I think it's highly impressive, and it's a use case which allows any particular page to talk to any other particular page, and its hierarchy structure is, well, it's really nice. So I'm going to show you this really quick. So on here, this is a parent component child relation. I have here text. This title is passed as a parameter from the parent to the child component. Okay. This is child content, information from the parent being shown in the child using render fragment. You're like, well, we kind of already did that a little bit. Okay. The below button lives in the child component. So this right here lives in the child component. When it's clicked, this will generate an event callback straight to the parent. So we click it here. You'll notice that this text appeared down here. Why did it appear here instead of up there? Well, it's mainly due to where the child component lives within the parents and all the content that's being displayed on the page. Down here, we also have a parent component will invoke a method within child. And you see that text changed up here as well, grandchild components. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the code. And one moment. Now I'm going to go ahead and close some of these. Let's close all the tabs and we'll start fresh. So now we're going to be looking at, I'll expand this out so you can see it. We have the parent. There we go. Oh. And we have the child and we have the grandchild. Okay. Let's look at the parent first. What are we doing? So we have a route. So this is basically a routable component, a routable page. I do have a using statement on here. Apparently I did not move that out to the imports page. So this is the feature I was geeking about 2 minutes ago, cascading value. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time showing this in the other components, and we're going to focus on this for the next 3 or 4 minutes. So right now I have a cascading value tag, and I have a name, which is called some message. I have a value which says some message for the grandchild. Okay. I have a cascading value, the name some number, and the value is some number for the grandchild. So what we have here effectively is both of these properties, which is defined down here as far as, hey, what are these properties? And I say these are messages for the grandchild. That's just the vernacular I used. Inside of here, one tag is wrapped inside of another tag. Inside of here, I have the child component. So the child component, you'll notice, is right over here in the Solution Explorer. And we're saying, hey, child component, on button click, we're going to show a message. This title is passed as a parameter from the parent to the child component. And if you'll notice, if you remember over here, that's kind of what we saw here a little bit. And I also have some other information, which maybe I'll show tonight as part of the demo. I'd commented this out for now. We got a comment, kind of look and feel there. But let's go down to our child component really quick. So that was our parent. If we look at our child, first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look down to here. And I see I have a parameter called title. I have a parameter called render fragment, another one called render fragment. I have an event callback, and that's all I've defined. But I also have another component, and this component is called the grandchild component. And just do a courtesy look at the HTML aspects. All right, nothing too crazy up there. You did notice we are doing a little if, little else if on our web page, showing a little content. Maybe we're not showing content. We have a little on-click Blazor, @ event, little parent @ data, but really it's the grandchild component we want to look at. So let's look over here. And the very first thing you notice is I have something called a cascading parameter, some message, cascading parameter, some number, some message for the grandchild, some number for the grandchild. Up here on the page, I have, hey, there's a message, boom. I have, hey, there is a number, boom. Now, if I go back to the child component, you'll notice there was no cascading parameter here at all. If I go to the parent component, you'll notice there was no cascading definition here, but you'll do notice I did set up the cascading tags here. So what this says is, because we have cascading values and we have a child content component, or a child component, we're going to go to the child component and we're going to carry with us, as part of the metadata, if you will, all of the cascading value tags that we have. So maybe if you have a third one, a fourth one, they would just be, daisy chained onto this list. Then you go to the child component, it says, hey, am I using the cascading stuff at all? Well, no, Tim, you're not using the cascading stuff. Oh, that's kind of strange. Where are we using it? I don't know. Let's see if our grandchild has it. Great, let's go to our grandchild. Look, oh my gosh, cascading parameters. Our grandchild is using this. So suddenly in your web development, you have methodologies to talk through multiple components without having to wire up everything in every single component concretely like you normally do. You're like, well, hey, if I want to get a value to component D and I start at parent A, then I have to pass those values obviously through B, C to get to D. Well, welcome to .NET Core 6, welcome to Blazor, welcome to WebAssembly and cascading parameters. Now you just say, hey, I know about the hierarchy of my family. When someone wants to step up and receive this cascading parameter, they can do it on demand, as the developer and the page requires. And that's what you see happening here in the grandchild. I thought that was really cool. That would have solved tons and tons of development issues for UIs in the past for me personally. So really, really super happy about that. Let's go back to the parent. Okay, so we talked about cascading parameters. Let's go ahead and talk about child content. So over here we have a child content information from the parent being shown in the child using a render fragment. Okay. If I look at the page, I have clearly that is where that's coming from. We also have down here something called danger child content. Oh, I wonder what that is. Who knows? Let's find out. I'm going to go ahead and save it. By the way, there is a feature, I think it's under tools, that will automatically hot reload on a save. I'm not doing that. I'm actually forcing the button to occur. So over here, we now have danger child content. So now you see this being shown, which that's interesting because before we saw the child content has now gone away and the danger child content has now appeared. Okay, let's go look at the child. So as the child page loads, first let's see if there's anything special. In here, we have nothing of note as far as our startup methods. We don't have it uninitialized. We're not doing anything crazy. Just says, hey, we're just going to go through a default behavior pattern. We're not going to try to control anything special. With this, we immediately say, well, are we getting any information? Because, well, we have a parameter that's being passed in. We have child content, which is being passed in. We have danger child content being passed in. And of course, we're passing back a button click event. So if we load in here, it says if danger child content is not null, we're going to go ahead and display that. However, if it is null, then we're going to go down to the child content. So in our example, the very first time, we simply did not even have this because I commented out. So the object did not exist. You did not get a null reference exception. It just says, hey, this is content. There is no content that represents this as far as data goes. Therefore, we're going to accept the default definition, if you will. It's going to be null, and we're going to skip this. We're immediately going to go to the child content. And that's what you saw on the page with those double quotes, hey, this is child content. But when we, of course, put in the danger child content, the if statement hit the first one. The child content did not happen at all. And that's what you get. So coming back over here, let's run a quick experiment. I haven't done this one yet, so who knows? People are watching. Maybe this is the bug. Maybe it's not. Let's find out. Did it reload? Did it reload? Show else condition for when there is the empty render fragment. There you go. And of course, that came from this one down here. Very good. Very good. So now we kind of understand how that works. We did talk about the I think we talked everything on here before. Let's go back to the parent really quick and make sure we're not missing anything of note. No, I did not show it as part of this demo because I was getting concerned about the time of the demo because we still have a lot of content to go through tonight. But you can do all kinds of things as far as attribute splatting. So up here, we have various attributes on your tags. You can change those on the fly within Blazor, and there's a lot of other cool things you can do. You can set them up via dictionaries, do it dynamically. So some people like to change maybe their styles, maybe their classes, maybe X, Y, Z. That's all something that can happen. I just did not include that as part of this demo. But that effectively takes care of the parent-child, grandchild cascading. The core key features, this right here, obviously the if statements are how we're using the child component in the grandchild components. And the grandchild itself, it's pretty empty. It's just some basic things in there. Let's go back to the web page. So we've talked about routing, bind properties, lifecycle, children, and parent. Before we continue, are there any questions? I'm going to leave this quiet for like 30 seconds for someone to speak up because I know we were going super fast. Any questions? Okay, so with that, really quick, I'm going to show you the counter really quick because this is the default out of the box. This is the component, fetch data, that's out of the box natively. Where those live at, we have the counter components, straightforward. You click a button. The button says increment me, increment counts, current count, and that's why you saw that counter digging up every single time you clicked it. Very easy component. The next one was the fetch data razor. This is default out of the box as well. We have the route, we have page title, we have a using statement, we have an inject, effectively, for that service being put into place. We have a check if it's page loading. We have our default table with a for each loop we're working through, and of course our initialization and getting something from our service. Our service here is also out of the box default. That comes over to here, and all that does is just set up some static information as far as, hey, what's the type of weather, and give some information back. We only want 5 rows of data back, and give us some random temperatures. That's how that whole process works. And of course, that uses the weather forecast model. And the reason why I bring this up here is because when we get to MUD server later on, which is really cool, we're going to get into the weather forecast a lot more in detail. So there's no questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And now we're going to enter the second phase of tonight. We're going to talk about Blazor Book Server. So the purpose of this demo is I'm going to go through dependency injections, how you start up your program.cs. We're actually going to show the interface working. We're going to be pulling some data back. We're going to show you a really good pattern that a lot of people out there are using, that the people in the acknowledgement section of the PowerPoint that they're using. And I thought it was really great to go ahead and adopt those. So first of all, we're just going to come up. Sorry, I got a little click happy. I need to stop this. One moment. Okay, so we're going to come over here, and we're now going to do Blazor Book Server. So here we have a fictitious library, and the user is coming in here and trying to manage, whatever books that they particularly own. And the page itself is fairly straightforward. We have my library. So I've already got rid of the weather service in the counter. Over here, we have a book, good to great. We have some basic data information here. We have an edit feature. We can go ahead and edit information in the book. We can go back. We can delete a book. Let's go ahead and do an update. Awesome ×2 as an example. JavaScript, you see this up here? This is a third-party JavaScript library that I've installed specifically for the demo. Just to show that people want to use JavaScript in their web pages, and you have something really nice you like in JavaScript, you can still do it. And this JavaScript is called from C#, by the way. So I'm going to show you that C# JavaScript in a little bit. But effectively, we have a basic CRUD page operation. So let's go ahead and look to see how this was made. So to start off with, we're going to go through here, and we're going to go through the program.cs. You'll notice the very first thing is I have DB context use SQL Server. I have a default connection, which is a default local database that I have set up, which is over here. Effectively, here's our connection string. So I'm pulling it straight out of appsettings.json. I have AutoMapper through dependency injection, so we keep track of that. I'm adding Scoped, our book manager, interface, and book manager. All this down here is default out of the box, so I didn't change anything here. So really the only thing I added were these 3 lines here. So for starting up a new project, getting development underway, really nice. Excuse me, global usings, we kind of covered that before. Imports Razor, if we are using anything for the web pages, that will go in Imports Razor. Let's go ahead and directly look at book. So because this is a book project for our library, I've created a directory or a folder called book. Really simple. Since this is a CRUD application, I want to list our books, and then I want something else where we're doing any type of upsert activity. We have our injects. We're going up here. We have book manager. We have navigation. This is new. IJS runtime. This is a Microsoft library which will allow you to call JavaScript from C#. So as we look down through here, we have a nav link. That was our create book feature, which you saw on the page. right here, add new book. We then have a typical table that we've created. If we have any objects in our collection, we're going to do a simple C# for each loop, going through every single one, using full C# IntelliSense. We're going to go ahead, if we click on one, we immediately have our route set up, and we're going to go ahead, that's a nav link, so it'll go straight to that route, which is book edit with an ID. And if we're going to delete, we're going to go to do a handle delete for an on-click event. And down here, I have a delete confirmation route list component we're going to be using. I have an is processing tag, which basically says, hey, is the parent still processing? Or are we done processing? And then is there a confirmation click, if you will. So how we set this up, we say, hey, we're going to be working with books. When the page loaded, first thing we did is we called the book manager to get books to sync. We've already kind of, when we started out, we went through here, we went through the business, we went through data access, and those are the interface, and that's how we're getting that information back. So all we did is say, hey, we're gonna get all books, we're gonna throw it into books, and once we got thrown into books, immediately the UI knows about it, and because the UI knows about it, it can go ahead and render the page for us. Down here, handle delete, JS runtime, invoke here. Now this here directly calls or directly invokes the activity. Over here, you'll notice I have called Toaster Success, which is the JavaScript library we're using, and I'll show you how that's set up or where we have that set up at. And the other features here are typical just C# activities. We have an await, get books, it's going to books. As far as naming conventions, you'll notice in traditional C#, if you're having a property set up at the top of your C# page, you use a capitalization. So you'll notice down here, if we have a capitalization, that immediately tells me that this is a page-defined variable versus doing a var statement with your traditional camel casing type of variable declaration. So really quick, I'm going to go into the helper. So I've created a helper folder here with a class. All the purpose of this is to do, it will call the third-party library. I have a method, Toaster Success, Toaster Error, and it will go into the JavaScript and say, hey, it'll look for JavaScript called show toaster. It'll pass it some variables. So if we come back over here to www.root, we go to the JS folder, common JS, you'll notice I have a show toaster with some JavaScript. I have a show swal, which is not implemented in this project. Then I have some delete confirmations down here. When this gets called, they get called with some parameter values. They do some stuff, and then it returns back to the caller. So that's how JavaScript gets operated from C#. Effectively, you still have your JS files down here, your JS libraries, however you want to work that out. And for full disclosure, if we go out to the layout page, you will notice that down here, I have a CDN for Toaster as an example. I also have a couple other things in here. This here I'm not currently using, but I do have Toaster. And of course, the common JS link down here in our layout page, so our entire site knows about it. So let's go back to our book list. So effectively, that is how we are automatically updating JavaScript, and that's when you saw that green tag. That's what you saw. Yeah, I think that's good. You know what? Let's just add a new book for fun. We're going to call this one, I don't know, let's call this test. We'll call this test. We'll do test here. Print length 111. Publisher, let's do test. Price, doesn't really matter too much. Comments, review rating here. Let's see what happens. Boom, that's great. But now we decide we don't like the test of the book. We're going to go ahead and delete that. We get a pop-up. This is a JavaScript. This is coming from the common.js you saw earlier, calling the C#, calling the JavaScript, and that's what you see happening here. Okay. So going through here, this is your traditional list page, if you will. The upsert. Here, same type of traditional stuff you see here. You see the routes we're doing. For example, when I clicked on it to delete, it immediately said, oh, look, I'm going to do an edit, or I'm going to delete type of activity. Here's the ID we're passing in. Here, we have an edit form set up. We have on valid submit, we're going to update our books or do our handle book upsert. We have data annotations in this example, and then we have traditional form validation set up in place. with our bind values. Of course, those are Blazor syntax, going on and so forth for those activities. And coming down to here, parameter, the ID we're passing in. You saw the ID in the route. This just kind of signals that, hey, this really is a route. This really is a parameter being passed into the page. We have some default on initialized. Hey, are we an update? Are we a create? That's what's determining what's happening there. On the handlebook upsert, this is traditional C#, nothing really special here. We are doing our JavaScript notifications. Hey, we did it correctly. We did not do it correctly. And over here we have our, yes, it says person. That probably should say book. We can count that as a bug on my part, syntactual. I'll have to update that. And then we have basically regular C# information here. We have a little bit of a catch statement. We had a try in here. And then we have navigation manager, which is navigate back to our book list found in that route. So effectively, I've just shown you a fully featuring CRUD application in 2 pages, minusing the length of the form, maybe 70 lines of code. A lot of that is space and a little bit of, just formatting, if you will. Really easy, straightforward. One of the great things about Blazor is you can immediately talk to the server. WebAssembly code will look exactly the same as this, except you will not be talking directly to the book manager. You'll be talking to your service API, and of course that will then call out to your program API. But everything you've seen here so far, exactly the same in WebAssembly, exactly the same in Blazor Server. And that's effectively Blazor Book Server in a nutshell. We did go through the program.cs, talked about dependency injection. We saw how the database was set up. I didn't really look at the nav menu again, but it's effectively shortened down from what we had earlier. Any questions as far as the Blazor Book Server before we get into MudBlazor? Okay. MudBlazor. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So I'm going to show you the overview of MudBlazor. We're going to go to their website. We're going to look at some code. The important thing to walk away is how do you implement MudBlazor? How do you get a fully responsive app that you can do on the web or your phone? And how can you do it in just a couple of minutes? And how can you have a great looking site? So over here, we're going to go out to Mud Server. And that's this guy right here. And I'm going to close these pages here. Let's close all tabs. Okay, so immediately you notice this has a different look and feel. Is the Mud Server default out of the box template. Just because it's fun. I could do this on the other one as well. Maybe it just looks as cool. I don't know. But you could come over here and you could set this up and say, hey, what is this going to look like on whatever device I'm currently working with? So you can come up through here and say, oh, look, all right, there's my drawer. Here's some various things. This is responsive. Maybe you're on an iPhone. Maybe you're super cool and you have a Surface Duo, or just whatever your device is. Maybe you're on an iPad, a tablet. Basic look and feel, nothing too special. But the cool thing is, it's completely responsive. So is normal Blazor and WebAssembly as well. This just has a little bit more curbside appeal, in my humble opinion. So let's go ahead and do a quick walkthrough. Nothing special here. Same look and feel. This is different. This is the one I want you to focus on. The components that are available for free with MudBlazor, in my humble opinion, after I've looked at a half a dozen other competitors which cost, MudBlazor is superior in documentation. Its features, it comes out ranked equal to or better than, I'm going to go on a leap and say all of them. I've looked at Syncfusion, looked at Rasden, looked at Blazorize. There's a couple other ones out there that I've looked at. I tried to implement them. Hey, this implemented easily. This didn't implement very well at all. Documentation is poor. Documentation is mediocre. MudBlazor across the bar is 6 or 7s and 10s as far as the ratings. And when you compare it holistically versus all of the other ones, in my opinion, it comes out on top. So let's look at this weather forecast really quick. It took approximately 5 to 10 minutes to set this up. And what we have here right now is we have a table with a tab. We have a chart surrounding, we have a dynamic chart in place with date ranges. We have icons on our pages here. And then we also have, look at this, calendar control. So I'm going to do May 1st. I'm going to do all the way to June 30. Automatically updates all of our information with the calendar control. We get our pagination, automatically going through our pagination. How many rows per page would you like? So if we go back to, let's say, 50 pages, now we get true pagination as it goes from, page to page to page. If we go into the code itself, we can make some minor changes. And I am going to have to stop the application for these changes. Let's just blow this up. Okay, so this is still using the default fetch data class. It's been modified. So first thing we're going to do right here is page size. So right now it says 50, 100 or 50, 100. I'm going to add 10 as a available page size. And when we get to our data itself, right now the amount of information we see is actually based upon the date range. So it's still random data, but it's going to be based on the date range, and that's how much data you're going to see. So now that we've modified this, I'm going to rerun it one more time just to see kind of performance for pagination. And then we're going to go back and look at the code, see how this works. And then we're going to go into Blazor MudBlazor in depth. How do you set it up? How does it work? And a couple of the interesting components. So we're back here again. So now I'm going to go through, and you notice the rows per page now have 10, 50, 100. So that's we changed that value that quickly, that easily. I'm going to come down here and say forecast for range. Let's go back. Let's go back to, let's go back to January. So I'm going to go January 1st, and I'm going to select the date range all the way to September 30. Immediately, we have instant reload of all information here. We get information 10 per, 50 per, 100 per. I'm going to change it back to 10 here in a second. And then we have, obviously, your pagination works. You also have your sorting in here. And this is pretty much a component out of the box. And of course, like I said, I did set this up in a tab format. So you have tabs. One is a chart and one is a table with special icons that we have in here. So that's kind of nice. Of course, go to last page, go to front page, all that's built in. A lot of people spend a lot of time working on these type of control, like the calendar control alone. In the past, I've spent, 1+ days working on calendar controls, jQuery, or just, whatever that solution was. Really nice having this out of the box. Let's look at the code to see how this works. And then when we're done looking at this component, then we'll actually go to the MudBlazor site, look at how to install it, and maybe we'll actually install one really quick just to see how it works. So we come over here. I'm going to go back to fetch data. So first thing to notice, I have a table. Exactly like HTML, except instead of saying, hey, I have an HTML table tag, you add the word mud in front of the tag, and it suddenly becomes a MudBlazor component. So we have a mud table, and we have header content, row template information, some pager information down here for pagination. We also have the next item. These are all MudBlazor specific. We have mud items, mud grid, and we have a panel. Earlier, I showed you on the page how we had tabbing. So I had a table, then I had a chart. All that is controlled effectively via our tab panels. So tab panel 1, tab panel 2 with information. How do you load this particular table? Same as we load everything else. You pass it a collection. The collection is called forecast. Our forecast lives down here in our declarations, if you will. Boom, we're forecasting a collection of an array of forecast information. Then obviously we're going through some type of calculation, setting up our data, setting up our information. But the key part is you load this with data, and that data simply gets fed into the table, the data grid, whatever it is you're using. You just kind of see how that works, if you will. Obviously, there are some additional tags, attributes that you could put in place here. Look at the rest of this at this stage. I think this is probably stuff you can probably digest by looking at the code. So I'm not going to go too heavily in here, but I do want to go ahead and look at how do you install Blazor, either as a project or MudBlazor as a project. So to start off with, I'm going to go out here to the MudBlazor website. And we're going to come through here. So if you use CLI command line, you can just do all this verbatim. The only one I really use is installing the templates. I've already got the templates installed. If you already have them installed, there's no damage done. All you're going to do is get an updated version. If you do have an updated version. So you come over here, you look at Package Manager Console, wait till that loads. You type in this right here. It will go through, it'll do a version check. And if you do not have it, it will install that for you. With that simple copy and paste, you are now able to go up to your solution, or in my case, my UI folder. You can do add, you can do new project. You can come up here, search for templates, just type in the word mud. Suddenly Mud Blazor templates pops in, you select it. You have a couple options. I'm going to call this mud server, and I'm going to call this, I'll call it demo. Okay, so we're coming through here. Now we have a couple different project types, okay? Depending upon what you're developing, if you're doing a WebAssembly project, you would simply do WebAssembly right here. If you're doing a PWA project, you would select whichever one you're doing. In our scenario, I'm going to go ahead and do server again, which is effectively Blazor server. And then suddenly I have Mud Server Demo right in here. As part of the default, you see, hey, look, they gave us fetch data again. This time it looks a little bit different. It doesn't have all the extra stuff down here that the previous version had that we were working with. And you look through program.cs, it simply has Mud Services, which says, hey, this is how you wire up Mud Blazor. And everything else is default, if you will. What does this mean for development? That is the question. So if we come back over here, I'm going to go to docs. And let's look at components. So here are a variety of components that you have. And you can go through, I'm going to blow this up a little bit here. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that better. So over here is an example, we were looking at table. So if we look in table, this is one of the great things about Mud Blazor is how the documentation is set up for you. You have here a simple table. You say, show me the code. Suddenly you have, let me zoom out a little bit, sorry. Whoa, that's better. You had mud table, you have your header content, you have your row content. And this is effectively how you set up a table to use this. Items, instead of using, our collection that you saw in our code, this says, hey, we're just going to go ahead and use a collection of elements, take 4, whatever that's doing for us here. And then down here, it says, hey, we have our collection of elements, IEnumerable, and we're doing what it is we're doing. So if you look at our code, and I'm going to go back to not the one we just downloaded, but the one that we did some changes on with the advanced weather service. Let's do some comparisons and look at what this means. So specifically, we're looking at the code on our left-hand side for table, which let me go back up to the top and click that code button again. There we go. You'll notice mud table, header content, row template, pager content, mud table. All of that is right here. Boom. I did a couple extra things. You'll notice I have a mud tab panel, mud tabs. So if I were to look at our components, and I zoom out a little bit so we can see, if we go down to tabs, you simply say, oh, look, I have a tab 1, I have a tab 2, I have a tab disabled. Show me the code. Oh, I have mud tabs, I have a tab panel. So now you see where I have incorporated their component tabs. I've taken their component table and I've put them together, and I've used them with a lot of synergy and without a lot of forethought. Simply saying, hey, I know I want some tabs. Hey, I know I want to use a table. Let's go ahead and rock this out. In tab 1, I'll have a table. Tab 2, I'll do something else. In tab 2, you'll notice I did a chart. How do you set up a chart? There's a bar chart. Here's a line chart as an example. Obviously, you can modify these with CSS and things like this on your page for stylings. But if you come over to here and you say, show me the code, this simply says, oh, I have a chart, mud chart. And then I'm going to go ahead and load it with some default values. So once again, the documentation on Mud Blazor is superb because not only can you look at this and say, oh, I think I kind of maybe understand how it works. But you can also click the run button. The run button will pull up an interactive workspace on basically on the internet, and you can kind of see how things work. So now it's processing, it's going through the code, it's seeing, hey, what's happening, and boom. So now you can see this is the code. This is the HTML components or the HTML section. And this is how everything looks. And you can kind of start taking it apart individually as you start looking at every single component. So in addition to components, MudBlazer has some other really nice features. And there are a lot of components, by the way. I would recommend everyone spend, if you're willing and you have the time available, an hour or two going through these components because there are a lot here. And as a personal developer or as an organizationally wise, you can find a lot of benefits. So going down, I'm going to go ahead. 1 second. Customizations. So here are some default colors that are kind of out of the box for Mud Colors. Obviously, you can override anything with personal colors, CSS, do what you like to do. Maybe you want to add Bootstrap. Maybe you don't want to add Bootstrap. Totally up to your own development. Whatever you're working with. But here are some default colors as an example. So if you want to change the look and feel, you can do that. It kind of gives you a little bit of an example, some things they have out of the box. But they have a couple other cool features here, and it'll take me a moment to find it. Yep, here's some default color schemes. Like Orion, for example, likes to use a light blue, like a blue and white colors. So this one down here in the middle left with probably, our company's kind of color a little bit, maybe a little tweaking. Oh, I know what I want to do. It's over here in products. Theme manager. So let's say you're developing something and you want to play around with all of your colors and maybe even your main layout page itself. You can come over here to the theme manager, you can load up this project, and you notice it has all of these placards for formatting styles. It's a pre-default you can choose from. And you see the video. I'm going to expand this a little bit so you can see it. So over here using the theme manager, they are determining a look and feel from a UI perspective, and they're doing that using the default template of the theme manager, which you can install, you can take a look at, you can kind of see, what is that UI experience going to be. But this gives you, another option how you can make something truly your own for whatever it is that you're looking for from a UX perspective. Very nice. Let's kind of go back. Of course, MudBlazer is open source, so you can take a look at everything, and you can make your modifications. Do what you need to do, kind of being part of that community, if you will. Let me go back here. Okay, so kind of in a little bit of a nutshell, and I know I went super fast through a lot of this material. There's a couple takeaways that I want everyone hopefully to kind of keep in mind. It is 2022. .NET 6 Core has been released. This numbers that I've talked about earlier, they've been reported 10 times faster than Node.js. Any framework 6, Core 6 is much faster than Core 5. And the speeds and the time responsiveness of Blazor Server, which I've shown you tonight, is very fast. And the numbers with that 20 milliseconds loading, obviously wasn't a lot of information on that page, but you still had a full table being loaded and other information, C# activities happening, going all the way through Entity Framework, the database, all the way back up, AutoMapper. 20 milliseconds is pretty fast. And then WebAssembly itself, because it's local on the local machine, one of the great advantages is if you have an organization who you want to save server resources, you do not want your company to be hit with many different things. Maybe this is why you use Angular. Maybe this is why you use a front-end client technology. You can choose WebAssembly, and you can still have all of those great savings. .NET MAUI's coming out, PWAs are coming out. You can literally do Razor style development, have that served over your network via WebAssembly, if you will, and not have your resources being used on your network until a server activity is actually requested. That has huge implications, for your organizations and for how you process. On a personal level, I like it. I find that I can develop with Blazor much quicker than I can with Angular. And I thought I was a fairly decent Angular developer. I used to love Angular back, as I was there day one with AngularJS. But it has evolved, and through the technology and through the years, I've kind of seen this growing pattern, and it's becoming much more better. And with Core 6 coming out, is a finally coming to its own as a full class citizen. The speed's there, the performance is there, reliability is there. And just the fact as a developer, you can work in one environment through all of your needs. You can hone those skills and react accordingly. Come side benefits, working with Angular, we did have issues occasionally with JavaScript library becoming outdated. We had white sourcing vulnerabilities that I've encountered in the past. With C#, generally you don't have to worry about those things because it's native part of the framework. Something else which I haven't touched on yet, and that is the use of components. Imagine your organization is serving internal house components via their own internal NuGet packages. So you now have NuGet libraries which belong to you and your organization, which you're serving via your own NuGet packages that are instantly accessible, instantly usable across your entire infrastructure throughout your organization. It's the equivalent of one-stop shopping. And the fact that Blazor and WebAssembly was built from the ground level for component-based processing says a lot. And the features we showed tonight, as far as the render fragments, the parameter passing, event callbacks, one of my favorites, the cascading parameters, parents talking to grandchildren, parents talking to great grandchildren, and all that happens at the level it needs to occur at. It doesn't have to have that middle ground data going in between. And the fact you do not have to use other mechanisms to simulate communications from one web page to another web page, I think adds a lot of value. A couple things I didn't talk about tonight, just because the scope of the meeting. Maybe you want to use local storage. Maybe you want to do something like that. And people are like, well, those are JavaScript functions. And I'm going to tell you, no, they're not. They're universal web functions. You can actually, tonight when I showed calling calling JavaScript from C#, I did not show you, but you can absolutely go to the developer tools and have some local storage items out there and access those variables, create those variables, and use those variables in your application. Maybe you're using it for some type of shopping cart. Maybe you're using it for XYZ reason. You can still access local storage, client level information, from that basis point in your C#, from your C#, talking to your C#, talking to the web. One environment, one-stop shop. So that's kind of what I want to communicate tonight. For those who are still with us, I will go ahead and show the page for the links out to the GitHub, and this will be there at least for a couple days. I'll probably do one update of a name change, if you will. Let me pull up the PowerPoint if I can find it again. And if there are any questions you have, any of the code you would like to see again, to ask questions on, I know at various levels I did move a little bit quick. And hopefully, hopefully you understand the reason why I did that, because I could talk for 6 hours on this. I could talk longer. So that's kind of where we're at a little bit. So I will go ahead and two things. If you haven't taken a screenshot of this, absolutely encourage you to do so. These three guys are phenomenal, excellent resources. But the other one, I think, is here. And it'll be there for a couple days, publicly accessible. Download it, make it your own, do what you want to do, and go from there.
All right. Good stuff. Any questions for Timothy?
Oh, were you saying something, Sue? Are you muted? I can't hear you.
can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, Sue, I can't hear you. Can you type out your question, perhaps?
So the one thing that I noticed as you're going through it, I think, you know, I've been keeping track of this just for kind of a periphery with Blazor as it's been evolving. The one thing I noticed is that there's a lot that's changed, or at least that I haven't been aware of, and that's pretty cool. It seems like it's coming to maturity, and really could be used for high scale enterprise stuff. So that's pretty exciting.
It can be. And I was going to show off some things about like deleting my database, deleting required properties, showing my application blowing up, and then showing you how quickly you can identify and recreate everything on the fly and do it like less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So the debugging capabilities of finding errors, I think it's unsurpassed because it's so localized to your development and what you're doing. And the traceability is right there for you. I think it is absolutely huge.
Yeah. The one thing that kind of bugged me as I was looking at it was all the strings. There were a lot of strings that, you know, if you were to refactor stuff in your application, I could see that becoming kind of a problem space, right? So I would look forward to the day when maybe it supports TypeScript and we can take advantage of fully typed stuff underneath. Maybe I don't know if that's a possibility or.
Well, it is C#. So if you can do it in C#, you can do it here.
Yeah,
Just because I may or may not have shown it in my application doesn't mean it can't be done.
Sure.
And so everything that you have as far as, you know, type safety or something along those lines, you have to remember everything was being declared. I'm going to pull up just a sample use case here. You know, let's go. One moment. Let's go to this guy. So as an example, all of these are, obviously this was defined by the database or the models that we had created, but you determine what these are and how these are referenced and how these are used. And I'm not aware of any data type that's not supported or any typings that's not supported. So I believe you have access to everything.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe
Okay.
we just need to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Looks like
so,
do got a question in there.
Oh, sure.
So I can either read it or you can. It looks like she's interested in how the performance of Plasm might affect the client machine.
Well, generally speaking, I don't think you'd have to worry about it too much because effectively, unless you are running like a very, very old machine, and by the way, WebAssembly will not work, I think, on Internet Explorer 11, I think it is. So if you're way back then, you're going to have some problems with that. But on modern machines, you shouldn't have a worry because effectively all you're really doing is just displaying content that your machine already has, and you're just serving up those web pages from your machine. And that's one of the reasons why they say it's super fast. You're not worried about the internet connectivity. As a matter of fact, if you design a website appropriately with additional fallback safeties, if you do not have an internet, depending upon your application, you can still process and do whatever you want to do. And you're in your things can either A, be completely localized, or B, you can set up a pooling scenario when the internet becomes available again, your application begins processing again. So WebAssembly does offer you a lot of features in that area. I imagine, you know, because there's a lot of developers out there, someone could perhaps make a web page where you could have problems on a web machine. But I would say that is definitely the exception than the rule. I have not experienced any issues on any web machine that any laptop that I've had, and one of mine's like 5 or 6 years old. No issues.
Any other questions for Timothy?
Okay, so it's kind of an FYI. I am going to be presenting at probably very 99.9% the same here at AnyCode next Tuesday, or not AnyCode, but Lincoln Code next Tuesday. In case someone had to drop off or you think someone might be interested in that meeting. A lot of the same material here. I'm also going to be presenting at a full day workshop, how to build an application a day, which will be much more extensive than what you saw here, by the way. It's going to be a lot of cool feature and stuff than you're going to have here. And that'll be at AnyCode, I think in July. And I'm also going to be doing a 1-hour session there dealing with Microsoft Identity Server, roles and permissions, and how that works with Blazor. So if you want to see, hey, how can I set up my my local database? How do I get all my role permissions in place? How do I get them tied out? How does Blazor, how does WebAssembly work with putting those tags to make sure you have the appropriate levels of access based upon your user? All that's going to be covered in an hour session. But the workshop itself will cover that and so much more.
Cool. Very good.
Oh, we have a. I'm sorry, is that a
That was just
screenshot down there, Matt?
yeah. I just
Oh.
that was the code that I was specifically looking at when I was.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, that some message is I'm like, well, let's call it something.
Well, yeah, I'm not so worried about the name, but just that you're referencing 2 strings, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So it is what it is, and that's a fairly common thing to do, but can lead to some maintainability concerns. Cool. Well, yeah, I learned a ton tonight. If you didn't catch everything that Timothy said, I did record the session. We'll have that up on YouTube here in a few days, if that's okay with you, Timothy. You
Sure.
cool with that? Okay. Yeah, so we'll put that up on YouTube and put a link out to it from our website. So feel free to check it out there as well. And then I believe we have some giveaways to do. Is that right, Robin? All right. So I'm going to take over the screen share, Timothy, if that's all right.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So I took an inventory of the names, the attendees here a little bit ago. Out of the runnings here. So we'll go ahead and give this spin. So we have 4 $50 gift cards. And so we'll just start giving those away. The first winner is right. So let's not quite.
Completely not rigged.
David, are you there? David's still
Bryce?
there.
Yes, I am.
Hey, awesome.
That is outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Congratulations. If you can either send me a direct message on Teams or an email, I will get you connected, or you can send it directly to Robin as well. Robin, I wasn't able to send you any direct messages. There's probably some kind of thing with Teams going on, but yeah. So one of those ways, just yeah, send me a note and we'll get you taken care of. All right, next winner is Aaron. Are you gonna get it? Oh man. Oh, he did. Aaron's there. Give me a shout out.
I'm here.
Hey, good deal. I know you, so I can get in touch with you.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Next winner. Gonna stop on Tim.
All right, Tim.
Hey, Tim, is he out there? Tim. Uh-oh. Left. All right, we got to be present to win. Okay, we'll make sure to tell Tim that he missed out on $50. All right, so we're still on number 3 here. Oh, ticked over. I think we can get Brian a gift card. Brian, I know you too. Actually, is Brian there? Oh, no. Oh, yeah, there he is.
Yeah, I'm muted. I'm here.
Cool. All right. All right, for the last $50 gift card. Elizabeth. I do not see Elizabeth in the attendees. Nope, not there. Try again. Muttonson. Oh man, striking out here. Few people drop off apparently. All right, we'll keep going. Oh, so close, Jim. Samuel,
Yeah.
there you go. Cool. All right. I assume the last name is relation there, or some.
Yes, it's an intern over at retail.
Okay. All right. Do you guys know how to get a hold of Samuel then?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So sounds like I just need to connect one person here, and all right, a few people, and then we're set. But yeah, thanks again so much, Timothy, for your expertise, your passion. Obviously, there's a lot of passion here, and I could that came through very clearly. So I appreciate that.
Very nice.
And yeah, so we'll be back in person next month downtown, and have some presenters and hopefully just as much passion as we all here, and more networking and collaboration. So we appreciate everybody who was able to attend, and Orion, thanks again for sponsoring. You guys are always a good supporter of our community, and Ben and Robin, appreciate you. So thanks again, and talk to you later.
All right,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
All right,
Good,
thanks,
bye-bye.
everyone.
Night all.
Guten Abend.